Hey, Ben here. We're still on the lake. I just love the way this bird pokes his head around. He's an outstanding pattern for hummingbirds, if you're into hummingbirds. Hey, this is the last, I think, in this little mini series of chainsaw practice pieces that I did, and this guy fails at the end. You can see he's missing his feet, and he doesn't have the stump on the bottom, but I thought I'd include him in there anyway. I was going to do this guy, and I envisioned him maybe being about 4 feet tall in a log, and so hang in there. And here's the mini log, and we'll go ahead and pull the bark off of this. And again, this was done just before I got the stuff in for the saw, and the MS I think it's 193. And the dime tip carving bar and the sprocket. And the sprocket turned out to be the wrong sprocket. And this is about 3 weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting for the correct sprocket to come in. So I owe you about 4 videos here that are in production, and the main one obviously being the initial chainsaw. And I did do a carving with the chainsaw, or partially with the old bar that came on the MS-193. And I just did a quick rundown. But in that, I show you the tools that I've got, the collected stuff that I took the recommendations from Jordy and Mark Hall was in there, I believe, and a couple other carvers in there, and on what you needed to start the chainsaw carving stuff. So I purchased all that stuff and set it up, and I have a video on that. But this one's just kind of straightforward. So this would be a large log in there, and I kind of envisioned a shorebird, and no particular shorebird. I wanted to get the S curves that we talk about all the time in there to make him look artistic. And you can see that I'm leaving a lot up on the head and the beak there. I envisioned some feet coming down, and you'll see towards the end of this video when I started goofing around towards the bottom of him, it was too fragile and it broke, which is a good learning exercise, I guess. I don't know. In the future, I might do a mini and then do the big carving, and then again I might not. So you can imagine this guy, and I took the contour down with the DeWalt, and I tried to mimic what a saw cut would look like. So this would be your log after doing the initial saw cuts, and then the mini carver, that Oz Elite there with a saber burr on it, would more refine it. So I imagine you could do the larger part with the main cutting saw, and for that saw, I forget what I'm running, but it's a medium size still. I can't remember the number on it, 170 or something along those lines. And it's got a little bit larger and a normal chainsaw bar on it, so you could rough that out. And then I would imagine this would be the part where you would come down and start using that dime bar. It's my understanding that the dime tip can get a little hot if you're heavy-handed in treating it roughly. So I would try to do, and because it doesn't have the roller in the tip of it, and that's why these guys run those chains a little bit looser. But anywho, center reference lines. I think on the big chain or big log, I would do the same thing just to make sure that I was staying within the contours. We've talked about center lines before. Once you get those in there, you don't want to cross over that, and everything in between is going to be rounded to those two pieces. You can see, just like a chainsaw or stump, big log, this guy's got a knot running right through his shoulder. And I just thought this might be kind of a fun project to do in a log. Everybody does a bear, everybody does an eagle. Those people with a little more talent will pull a wolf out, and then a lot of people will do a bird. Obviously turtles. You can tell I've stared at a lot of chainsaw videos, and I even ran across one yesterday looking in there that was about a 10-foot log, and a guy did the old classic whittling chain. So he cut the chain out and cut each individual link and ended up with this huge chain, and that's kind of fun. I might do that. That's the only one that I've seen be doing that, but he ended up with this 15-foot long chain when he got it all done. Interestingly enough, when I was stationed at West Point, when I was in the military, there was a chain that West Point, United States Military Academy, the reason it was named West Point was it was a bend in the river, and during several of the Revolutionary War, what they did was they took a chain, and there's a huge chain. It's got 2.5, 3 foot links on it, and they took that chain and somehow in those days strung it across the river so the British ships couldn't get up the river. They'd come around the corner in this bend, and they would run into this chain. Nowadays, I don't think that'd be a problem. They'd put 2 Navy frog divers in the water, and they'd take their cutting torches and make short work of that chain, or just a couple shells lobbed at the corner would probably blow that chain off. Anyhow, among the things that people tend to do with the chainsaw carving is a bird standing up. So that's how this guy came about. And I think I'm using a ruby bit there, pretty sure, looking at it. And I'm just trying to refine his head. Someone in the last video, the one I posted after not posting for a couple weeks, and griping about not getting my bandsaw ordered and not getting the dust collector ordered, in addition to not being able to find a contractor that's interested in building a building. Imagine that, no contractors interested in building. But somebody in the comments, one of you guys that's a regular, I won't dime them out, sent me another link to a tool company, and I checked on there yesterday, and it looks to me like both of the items are in stock, and they're able to ship. So now I'm in that proverbial hell where the other company has taken my money already, and the crap is on back order. So I need to get them to cancel that, and then I can move forward and order the new one, and hopefully have a bandsaw. So I kind of like this guy. I see a lot of flaws in where he's coming, but the concept behind it was to stay with the S concept, meaning that he's got S curves in him. He's not static, and he's kind of looking skyward there. One of the challenges of chainsaw carving is you have to fit the piece that you're doing inside the log. In other words, you've got to have either a really big log if you're doing some strange stuff, or you have to put some pieces together. A lot of times these logs are not of the best quality, and obviously they're designed to be outside. So any place you put a joint in these, i.e. wings and that sort of thing, put a hand on, that's obviously easy to do. You create a weak spot right there unless you treat it pretty well, and the weather would get in there, and eventually that would be a rot point or whatever. I've got a few pieces that are out. There's the family calls it the Pope gnome, because I did a little gnome 3 foot tall with the chainsaw many years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, and he sits out there and he weathers really well. 20 years ago I did a little bear with his hands up, as in I give up, a cartoon bear, and he's almost gone now. He's set out in the weather. It really didn't have any finish on him, and he's starting to rot away. So back to this guy here. Again, I'm drawing the lines in, working his head with my standard style. on the bigger one, I did get a couple of eye bits. They suppose they look like they would burn. Other people that have used them, they burn in the eye more than they carve the eye in. It's a cone. Obviously, the wood has nowhere to go. But the little sets that I've got, I think I've got them in another video though. There, I got those to do the chainsaw carving, and I'm going to use one of the smaller ones on this guy to do the eye. But like most of the bird carvings, if you're watching for the birds, and people do seem to like the birds more than the goofy stuff that I do. But that guy has an eye channel in there now, and you could almost get away without putting an eye in there if you get that contour right in the eye channel. Oh, here they are. This might be where the problem with filming just at random and in the middle and not really having a plan is I'm not sure which video I put what in. But these are the pieces that I bought to do eyes. I don't think they're big enough. There's one that's pretty big. It's like 3/4, maybe an inch. And I'm looking around because it seemed to me when I got these, there were 7 or 8 in there, and I thought there was one that's a little smaller. I think that's it. It was laying over there with my other bits. I still haven't drilled blocks and put my bits on blocks and that sort of stuff. I, for some reason, can't live with a piece of foam. I know a lot of people will take and stick a piece of foam off the side and stick their bits in that. I can't do that. I don't know why. It works just as well and looks just as good probably if I were to take a block and drill the piece in there. Obviously you need 2 different sizes, or I do. I need an 1/8 inch hole drilled in several of those to put 15 or 20 bits in, and then I need a 3/32, which is the second bit. You see the blue hand piece there? That's the Ram I-Cube, and I run an 1/8 inch collet in that one. You've heard me talk about the difference between the two before. And then in the Elite, I run a 3/32 collet. But there's the burning of the eyes, and I thought I would experiment around with a little of them. You got to get pretty deep to get that full cone in there. And once again, there's the 3/32. I am a little bit concerned about this handpiece because it's vented on the end there, and it does get dust all around that. So I'm wondering if maybe the bearings on this might take a little bit more abuse. So this is a ruby bit. This is the smaller taper bit. I don't use this one as much as I use the full size, and I'm just going in around that eye socket and feathering out the head there. That's a pretty good example. If you're doing beginning birds and you look straight, you get the eyes in there. The hardest thing is to get those 2 eyes centered. So first they have to be centered on the beak, and they're reading from one side. You can get away with them being wonky because as you turn it around, but you can't get away with you'll see the wonky if they're not perfectly aligned up and down, left and right, when you look at it from above, because you'll see one eye slightly behind the other. A lot of times you can look directly from the front of the bird, and if you screwed up the eyes, they'll look cockeyed or cross-eyed, and that's the hardest part. The easiest way to do that, in the old days, I would take 2 push pins and stick them in both the eyes, and I'd move the pins around until I was happy with where the eyes were, and then I obviously draw my circle around the push pin, which made it really easy. And then I could come back and adjust the sizing of the whole eye hole, and typically they came out pretty good. They were lined up. Now nowadays I just guess, and on occasion get lucky, and they're perfectly lined up, and I get lucky more often than not. Just from having done a lot of them over the years. But some of them are wonky. And in that case, they're one-sided or two-sided. You look at them from both sides, and they work out really well. But if you get them at an angle where you got both eyes in there, you'll see they're kind of wonky. So you're kind of getting an idea of where I was going with this. I liked the curves in this. I liked him sticking up. And I found that I didn't leave quite enough room at the bottom to finish out the tail on it. I kind of wanted a little bit more of a tail. And this not being any particular species of bird, just a kind of a fictional thing. I wished I had left a little bit more branch or log on the bottom side of it. And this, like I said before, this might be a pretty good idea to do a little mini pattern out before you go whacking into a log. The one piece that I did do is a gnome head, about 2 foot tall, and I went ahead and finished. I did a rough carving, rough out with the chainsaw. Not having the dime tip, I gave up a lot early and went back to conventional tools. And I will have a video on that guy. He turned out pretty nice. The wife likes him. He's sitting out here in the woods at the lake on a stump, and I'm going to recess the head in the stump a little bit and put 2 hands, carve 2 hands and put them up over the top of the stump, so it looks like he's inside the stump of one of the trees that was cut down several years ago. But I will have a video of that. So thus far, the videos that are coming are that video I just talked about, which would be the initial chainsaw carving. I'll put a little bit of the start of that in the tool section, where I describe and show you what I got to do the chainsaw carving. It's kind of interesting in and of itself, and a lot of material. And then you got this guy, which is obviously up if you're listening to this. I have a driftwood, small driftwood, probably 6 or 8 inch Spirit Man that a grandson and I picked out when we went up to Lake Superior here a week or 2 ago. And then the last one, I have a sign that I carved for a friend who wanted a new signpost for their going into their property. So here's where things start to go bad. I'm trying to get the tail out. I don't like the curve that I've got going here. It looks kind of like a grouse. I don't have enough wood on the bottom there to finish out what I really wanted to do. Make this guy long and lean. And I wanted him to stick up a little bit more on his feet, as opposed to his feet just ending there at the stump. So that is a saber burr. I'm finding it's a 3/32, which would be a little bit smaller, but I'm finding it to be pretty fast on the elite there. In the old days, I would go back to the 1/8 inch with the little stouter burr. And I don't use the cuts all extremes. I use the mediums. But here's where I'm trying to figure out where his feet are at, and things start to get wonky. I'm getting way too thin when I get this down, and the thinness has to do with trying to keep the S shape of this guy going as he and read correctly as it goes down into the log. As you'll see shortly here, I thought I had pulled this off in a brilliant manner, and you can see that I'm taking more and more of that base away. And if this guy were truly chainsaw carving a log 3 or 4 feet tall, maybe 5 feet tall, I would never get away with taking away this much of the base. He would fall over, and I've been thinking about it. I'm going to do some wizards and that sort of stuff when I get around, and they'll be 5-6 foot tall, and some bears that are 6 foot tall, that sort of thing. Eagles and put them around the property here. Kind of like my own little spirit walk that Jordy's been doing, and he's got another one he's starting to put up in Ireland. He's starting to help a guy in Ireland out, one of his followers. So, and that's a great idea. I mean, these spirit walks are pretty awesome. People like to be out in the woods, and that's just kind of fun stuff to to go. And so maybe Jordy's onto something. Maybe he'll start these Spirit Walk parks all over the U.S. But I'm kind of building my own here. One of my concerns is the dwarves that are running around here. I call the grandchildren dwarves. Most of them are small, and they like to climb on and grab crap. So I'm trying to design the log carvings that I'm going to do, and I may even have to pour a little bit of concrete and put a metal rod or something in there. I don't want them falling over and crushing one of the grandkids. That would look bad, and their parents might not like it. In the military, we used to call that, when you did a story like that, hey, I crushed my grandson or your son with one of the big cool carvings that I did over there. We call that not briefing well. That story doesn't brief well. So when you go to tell their mom or dad, it doesn't brief well. Not a good story. So I've been kind of trying to design these so that they don't fall over, and they've got some rigidity to them. Because as you know, all the dwarves like to crawl and climb over. They can end up on top of something that you can't even figure out how the hell they got up there. I saw one of them a year or two ago on the player piano. I turned around, and they were 2.5 years old, and they're standing on top of the damn player piano, and somehow they'd climbed up the bench, over the keyboard, ended up on top of the piano. And it was a case where a couple of us saw it at the same time, and everybody got up really slowly. And keep in mind that this kid could barely walk and hardly stand up straight on their own on flat level ground, and yet somehow they all of a sudden ended up 5 feet in the air. So people moved across the room very slowly, speaking like you would to a bank robber, calm voice, and finally got a hold of the kid before they teetered off the edge of that thing. So these carvings need to be dwarf crush proof. You can see now, looking at this in hindsight, I thought I was going to be okay, and you can see how thin everything's getting down in there. I'm just not getting the feet to go where I want them, and it's not working in my brain with the S curves that I was trying to get. But you can imagine this being done with the chainsaw stuff, and it would be kind of a neat project sticking back somewhere. What else do I got to tell you? Not much. This is the last day down in Iowa. I think I've got grandkids the next week. And if that sprocket comes in, I might get some a real chainsaw video going. Where obviously it's garden season, and the bears got into the garden and destroyed the beehives. So I've got to go pick up bees here in a day or two and get them established back in the hive for the garden. We've got to get the rest of the garden planted. Yep, that's right. We're still just finishing up garden planting. That's how much colder it is here in northern Wisconsin. And then deer broke down the garden fence because I hadn't turned on the electric portion. So we've got about a 9-foot fence around the garden. If you don't have that fenced up here, the deer will go in and just have a heyday. They'll munch everything in the garden, right down to the nubble. And I don't know why that is, because there's a lot of good stuff. They destroy the fruit trees. We've got some little 4 or 5 year old fruit trees, and they just eat them down to the nubble. So if you don't hit them with your car, and you don't shoot them, you end up with a whole bunch of deer, and they like to eat the garden. So I'm putting wings on here. Don't know if this was a good idea or not, but it seemed like the thing to do. And I've said this a couple times in this video, but I'm really kind of liking the idea of doing a smaller one like this, a sample, and then have all the problematic areas worked out that I can correct when I get ready to take the time and spend the effort to do the chainsaw portion of it. So you may have heard it, depending on how I edit. The furnace in this condo down here kicked in right about the time I in the middle of that recording, and it's annoying. The furnace is in the middle. It's a beautiful condo. The company pays quite a bit of money for it. It looks out over a lake here in Mason City, Iowa, and the only problem with the whole thing is it's a upstairs, 2-level, because there's an apartment downstairs. They put the furnace right off the kitchen, 30 feet away, and in the winter it kicks on and it really makes a racket. And then obviously it's Africa hot down here in Iowa, cold in the winter, hot in the summer, and every 10 minutes this thing will kick on. So here's where it all went wrong. I was liking that I got the contour of him going. You see how small the bottom was there? You can see sitting on the stump there what he would have that's a stop block in the background, in case you're curious, to push against. And I'm messing around with him here, getting ready to do the finish work. That's a ruby round ball. And as I'm going through this, just the light pressure that I'm using on this, I'm noticing that the bottom there, that I took too much away. And obviously with the chainsaw carving, this would be a couple 100 pounds of wood up above the feet there. I kind of work on a lot of these with 3 points of contact. So you got 3 attachment points typically. 1 obviously is a bad idea because everything can pivot around that 1. 2 better than 1, obviously. 3 seems to be the money. So when I do different carvings, I'll typically, if it's going to be a standalone, I'll try to use 3 points of contact. And I'm not really putting a whole lot of pressure on any of these pieces, but I'm going down and starting to refine things, putting a groove down the beak and that sort of thing. And I started to notice that he was a little bit wobbly. And in hindsight, I would have taken that head, and I'm going to take the head down a little bit more. But as I'm messing around with it, starting to put a few burn marks in the head to see what this guy would look like. And obviously on the bigger piece, I'm not going to be able to do this, but I'll probably do this with a belt sander, maybe a little bit bigger grinder. And I'm doing my standard brush off the burn marks. And this is a little more aggressive, puts a little more pressure on him. And right here, I think, maybe not. Oh, there you go. Look at that. So poof, all that work that was done on the bottom of him, which I wasn't liking anyway, turned this guy into a separate piece. I will probably finish this guy out. I may or may not film that. I haven't done any more work on the hummingbird, and I apologize. I should. I have the eye to finish the other side, but that's what happened to him. So hey, stand by. There's a couple more coming, and like, subscribe, get the subscribers going. And thanks a lot. This has been Bandwidth Studio on the Lake.